What's going on, citizens of the Dark Knight Nation, and welcome back to the channel for another episode of Comics Insider. We'll be breaking down, discussing, and analyzing the first highly anticipated issue of GEIGER #1 by Superstar creative team Geoff Johns, Gary Frank, and Brad Anderson. These are three of my favorite players in the game right now. I think they are three of the best in the industry, perhaps respectively three of the greatest craftsmen at their individual area of expertise that the industry has ever seen, but that remains to be seen. I know this book was really hard to get your hands on because of the hype behind it, so I want to let you guys know that we will have an opportunity for you to be able to win a copy of this book for yourself. And I will tell you that it is entirely dependent on whether or not we can hit a like goal. So make sure you smash that like button down below and hit the subscribe button as well. If we can hit 30 likes within the first 3 days of posting it, I will give one of you guys a free digital copy, and 50 likes within the first 3 days, I will do a physical copy. So keep that in mind. Make sure you watch to the end of the video so you learn how you can completely enter in to win. But with all of that out of the way, let's get into this book. GEIGER #1 opens somewhere deep in the Nevada desert with two men outfitted in hazmat suits and a Geiger counter reading ambient radiation off the charts. The grizzled vet of the pair remains calm, while the younger man's anxiety gets the best of him. See, these radiation levels are apparently a breeding ground for something pretty nasty. While new to all of this, the young rookie does make a point to ask about the one who walks outside without a suit, the Meltdown Man. Yeah, the older of the two says his story is as true as air is death, a legend of the unknown war flickering in the distance. The story of Tariq Geiger starts and ends with family. We cut back to years ago. Apocalyptic messages via radio and television preach of death, revolt, government scandal, and most importantly, an alert of missiles incoming toward the U.S. from unknown assailants. In Boulder City, Nevada, Tariq hastily leads his family toward a bunker in their backyard with resources to survive the potential of nuclear war. Just as he hurries to shepherd his family inside, Tariq's son notices the dog barking at something in the distance. In the sky, seemingly shot from not more than a few miles away, is an active projectile barreling their way. Our protagonist jets out to the perimeter of the yard to bring Molly to safety, but on his way back, a bullet slices through his calf, dropping him to the ground. Approaching from the driveway are their neighbors, armed and ready to steal the shelter out of fear and racist sentiment. Even still, Tariq's #1 concern is his family, as he screams at his wife Tracy to shut the door. With concern, she resists, but he doubles down, begging her just before they exchange what they presume to be their final goodbyes. The desperate racist neighbors threaten death to Tariq, but resolute in his last stand, he refuses without question. Just as the neighbor loads a bullet into the chamber, nuclear apocalypse ensues, dressed in a violet glow. We cut to the perspective of Tariq Geiger as the world before him wastes away, including himself. Before we know it, we're back in Boulder City 20 years later, as a pack of scavengers make their way through the desolate radioactive landscape that was once filled with life. Wherever they come from, resources are running low, and they've been sent out here to resupply despite the stories that they've been told about the area. After spotting a nearby bomb shelter, they attempt to raid it for goods, but atop its wall is a man clad in black that warns them of their trespassing. This is his property. People have tried to step past his property line in the past, but each and every one of them have ended up under it. Not taking kindly to who they now recognize as the glowing man of legend, they fire off a sprinkling of bullets to no avail. The glowing man drops to the ground without hesitation, breaking teeth and bone, warding off the hazmat-suited vultures. Despite their beating, the glowing man desires to send a greater warning, one that'll inform them of how he got the name. Geiger removes a set of boron rods from his back, and the radioactive green spreads from eyes to skull to the rest of his body as he reiterates, "No trespassing." The cowardly lot make a break for it, leaving their scavenged goods behind, and Tariq lowers the rods back into his holster, reverting to normal, or at least seemingly so, reaping their rewards. Our lonely hero returns back to his home with Molly, both of them irrevocably changed from the explosion 20 years ago. Tariq now more fit than when we found him, and Molly, well, she has two heads. This life without his family is not one worth living, except for the purpose of guarding their shelter until it's safe for them to see the world again. Tortured, in pain, but with a purpose unyielding. We then cut to a space decorated in medieval fashion as a knight addresses a supposed king with news of the scavenger's encounter with the radioactive man. He mentions that a Safari Bob claimed to have met the glowing man and made a pact to keep out of Boulder City. For years, he and his people listened, but now that supplies are scarce, things are different. At first, the Child King ignores the man before him in favor of readjusting an artist's depiction of him slaying a dragon. The man warns of the danger that may come now that they've broken Safari Bob's law, but the Child King, filled with petulant rage, armed with chicken leg in hand, goes off in a fit. Offended by being questioned in ways that his father wasn't, he commands the gathering of the nuclear knights for the glory of his kingdom. The boy king must now show the rest of the bosses that he is greater than both them and his father, mounting a charge to bring back the head of the glowing man as proof of his glory. Geiger #1 had a lot to live up to based on the people behind it, and I think it has a very fair share of successes, so let's talk about it. First, let's get into the pacing of this book. It was very quick, but I feel like there was a very consistent and overwhelming efficiency of setup, exposition, and general world building through this utilitarian dialogue that also has this identifiable cadence and visual storytelling via shot composition and expression. There was a lot going on here, and there were a lot of small little offhand things, like things that are mentioned in the dialogue, for example, or small gestures through the character acting, and even things in the periphery of Gary Frank's shot development that put in a lot of work to contributing to exposition or the world building, or in some degrees even plot, and then some. We're given just enough information in this issue to feel interested in the state of the world and in the protagonist, while plenty of questions are still left to be asked, and that is, I think, the best way to get a first issue off the ground, is by bringing us in enough to be able to connect with the characters, to be able to feel intrigued or engrossed by the world. But there need to be plenty of questions for us to ask as the reader in order to make this a satisfying experience over the course of the run of the book. There was a really great development of tension in the opening of this book, and by opening I don't mean the exact introduction. What I am pointing more at is Tariq's final goodbyes with his family. It really reverberates throughout the rest of this book, and I assume it will continue to do so with the series, but it resonates so well with this consistent theme of human desperation that I think will persist throughout the rest of the series, seeing how we're in this post-apocalyptic sort of tribal America. I love the fact that it doesn't rely too much on monologuing or dialoguing to carry the heavy load. Comics are a visual medium, and it got a lot of done work and shared that load with Gary Frank and Brad Anderson. But what I can appreciate about that dialogue is that it was very sharp, it was purposeful, and every character felt unique based on the way they spoke, and it's something that I don't think gets enough credit in comics. I kind of want to go back to that idea where we were talking about very sort of subtle things that put in a lot of work, and I want to give a lot of credit to the silent page when Tariq goes back to his home after warding off the scavengers. There's this use of moment-to-moment and aspect-to-aspect storytelling that Gary Frank pulls off that I think really registers the solitary crusade of Tariq Geiger and reinforces how tortured this man is by this duty that he is keeping himself to uphold. And that, it's so relatable, you know, that sense of love that he feels for his family. And now I'm going to tell you right now, if we get to the end of this series and the family is like actually dead inside the bomb shelter, that's gonna ruin my whole life. Like, yeah, they're gonna get some tears out of me, and oh god, I can't handle that. Moving on, just, you know, between the collaboration of the writer, the artist, the colorist here, there is this wonderful and expansive sense of atmosphere, which is a sign of cohesion between the three in the best way possible. Moving specifically on into the art, Gary Frank uses a very simple horizontal rectangular layout set, but it's really well paired with the intimate understanding that he has of shot placement. All of the shot sizes and compositions vary in order to evoke this really cinematic visual experience, and Frank aptly knows when to use repeated shots containing a similar action on panel in order to rein the reader in on a momentary focus, which I can really appreciate here. He just shows a full command of camera and perspective and lighting, which emphasizes this highly emotive character acting that he has going on, whether it be emotive expression or fast-paced action. Something that I always love about Gary Frank is his design aesthetic and that cleanliness. It's this merger of classic comic book superheroism and realistic cinema, and that simultaneity is something that I think makes Gary Frank stand out. Particularly in this issue, though, there's a grittiness, a not-so-clean feel to his art with the thick hatching for depth and detail that I feel is just so appropriate to this post-apocalyptic setting, as opposed to something that he's done, on Superman with really, really tight hatching that is arguably more nuanced, but he's paying attention to how style is going to affect the way this story is being exposed to us, and I really appreciate that. Very well, Gary Frank probably could have done the tightest artwork of his career, but he's making sure that aesthetically there is a translation in tone for this world, even to the point where the panel borders of this issue all look sketched in as opposed to hard lines. So small things, man, small things. I would also be remiss if I didn't talk about Brad Anderson's wonderful colors. He takes a really subtle approach to selecting his palette, but it was highly effective. In the moments stuck in the past, he uses a swatch of muddled greens, taupes, peaches, and blue purples, transitioning to these burnt yellows, blue greens, oranges, and of course neon green when we get to the present. He plays this super active role in curating the atmosphere and tone for both these mundane and solitary moments, but also the more action-intensive or high-energy scenes. And, he doesn't get enough credit. I think he has a really good sense of how best to render something like Gary Frank's art because it has that simultaneity of cinema and classic comic book. He doesn't go oversaturated, kind of cartoony, but he's also not afraid to make sure that the color has a lot of life to it. And it just plays really well. There's a lot of nuance here in the little midtones that he uses to help establish an even greater sense of depth in Gary Frank's artwork. Just really spot on. Sticking a number to this one, I'm probably going to have to go with a 9 out of 10. It was really fast-paced, but the creative team do a really great job at making me invested in the protagonist, his plight, setting up a really interesting landscape that is going to play on his core wound and that solitary crusade that he's taken up for himself. Very simply, it's about a man looking to protect his family, and there are a lot of really resonant metaphors of fatherhood and husbandship, if that's a word, that I think will certainly be expounded upon in later issues. But I'm so excited, to continue on reading this book. I'm really glad to see creators of this caliber taking their talents to indie comics where they are free from the not so creative interests of corporations. This story just feels very pure, and because of that has an overall authenticity that I think can't be understated or undermined. So if you want a chance to win this issue for yourself, make sure that you like this video, you're subscribed down below to the DarkKnightNation, and you comment letting me know what you think about Geiger, if you did pick it up, if you didn't pick it up, why not, so on and so forth. And if you do want to make sure that this giveaway is possible, keep in mind that we have to hit 30 likes in the first 3 days in order for me to give away a digital copy, or 50 likes in the first 3 days in order for me to give away a physical copy. So, share this video with your friends. Not only does it really help me out, but it'll help you guys out, in getting a chance to win a copy of this book. That's all courtesy of AJ's Comics in Colchester, Connecticut. You can check them out. Link in the description below. An awesome store there where I go to spend my comic book money, which is probably more than I should spend, but here we are. Anyways, no regrets. They have this really cool comic book pull list system where you can manage everything online, and if you'd like, they'll ship the comic books to you, and if your order's over $100, it's free shipping, even if you're on a military base overseas. So a lot of really great customizability in that, making sure that you get exactly what you want. And the owner, Pete, is absolutely spectacular at staying in touch with you, making sure that you get exactly what you're looking for, and even providing suggestions if you so choose. And one of my favorite parts is that just signing up for a pull list gets you 10% off everything in the store. Nothing wrong about that, and it scales up depending on how many books you're picking up at the store. So keep that in mind. Make sure you enter in the win the giveaway, and I hope you all enjoyed this review of Geiger. We'll catch you next time on another video from Dark Knight Nation.